So because I wasn't able to get to all of the mailbag questions that I wanted to in my mailbag video from earlier this morning, I mentioned that I would be doing a part 2 so I could cover some of your guys' questions, and I apologize if I wasn't able to get to yours, as I was a little selective with some of these questions so as to not create an hour-long video. So if you missed the video from earlier this morning, which covered some of the questions, feel free to check it out. I'll leave a link for it in the description. Also, guys, really appreciate all the kind words and support on my last video where I spoke to a sponsorship that I have with Manscaped. You guys are great. Truly, you know, I'll admit I was a bit hesitant to do another sponsored video because I really do want to focus more on the Bulls content, as no one just wants to hear ad reads being read every video. So I do promise to keep those ad reads to a minimum. If you missed it, I have partnered with Manscaped, and you can use my referral code to get a 20% off discount from your order. I'll leave a link in the description below in case you're interested. Now that we got that out of the way, though, let's continue with where we left off and do some more mailbag questions from you guys. Some of these questions I actually got from this morning, actually. But this one is from Shravman, I presume. Should the Bulls restart the rebuild? So you'll note this question is also from the 15th, so right after the Orlando Magic loss. And just like the last question that I answered that also came after that loss, I'm still going to go ahead and address this one because although the Bulls have won 2 straight and have looked better since that disappointing loss, it's inevitable that the Bulls will lose some games still at this season, and I'm sure when that happens you'll have fans come in here and say that this team is trash and we need to start building all over again from scratch. So I actually appreciate the question, but my answer is no. No, not after the Bulls just traded away 2 first-round draft picks, 3 young players in Wendell Carter Jr., Chandler Hutchinson, and Daniel Gafford, and we brought in a couple of older players in Nikola Vucevic and Daniel Tice. No, at this point, you go all in and you build more around this crew going into the offseason. This is a talented team that is still trying to figure out their identity. There are a lot of things they need to work on, like their defense, team chemistry, and trusting in each other. And I know Coby has played very well these past few games as the team's starting point guard, but the Bulls should still pursue a true playmaking point guard who can run the offense, because until I can see that consistently from Coby, I'm not quite convinced. But when you look at this team, you have your star players in Zach Lavine and Nikola Vucevic. You have younger players in Coby White, Patrick Williams, and Troy Brown Jr., who are incredibly talented. I was going to throw Markkanen in that mix, but his future with the Bulls is probably a little more questionable. You add veterans like Thaddeus Young, Satoransky, Garrett Temple. I mean, this is a solid team on paper. Now, I'm not saying this roster alone is enough to compete for a title. No, far from it, but it's enough to keep building around, adding a few more pieces that could put them into contention rather than just scratching everything and starting all over when the new trade acquisitions haven't even been with the team for 1 month yet. Next up, we got Spitfire. If Chicago got on an expansion team and a rivalry emerged like the White Sox and the Cubs, would you still be a Bulls fan, or would you support the new, fresh franchise? No, I'm still going to be a Bulls fan no matter what. It would honestly be weird for me to root for any other team no matter how bad the Bulls are, even if the other team, this hypothetical Chicago expansion franchise, was really good. No, I'm a Bulls lifer and nothing will ever change that. The next question from Lord Inebrios, do you think we can afford to re-sign Tice? I'd really love us to keep him, but I would worry, I do worry that he may be more than we would be able to afford. I've had a lot of people asking me about that recently, and I'll admit I'm not the best when it comes to understanding salary caps, luxury tax, trade exceptions. I'll be the first to admit that I need to study up on it more. But what I do know is the Bulls still have quite a bit of cap space going into this offseason because you have so many expiring contracts from current players. Now, bringing in a guy like Vucevic does complicate things a bit because he's on a fairly large contract until 2023. Lavine, although a low salary for a player of his caliber, it's still nearly $20 million, and that won't be expiring until next season. Then you also have to factor in, do the Bulls look to retain Markkanen as a restricted free agent? How much is he going to cost? You have Thaddeus Young and Tomas Satoransky, who are on partially guaranteed salaries next season. Do we keep them and have them be fully guaranteed for the last year of their deals? So already you're eating into the cap space that is going to be freed up in the offseason, and that doesn't factor in adding additional complementary players or even getting a big name point guard to bring in. So to keep Tice, I mean, it all depends on how much Tice is potentially going to want, because I really like Daniel Tice and the front office loves this guy as well based on their recent comments of him. I like his energy and his hustle that he brings on the defense, and he can be a decent player on offense as well. He's exactly the type of player this Bulls team needs to increase that effort on the court, and to lose him in free agency would be tough for the team. Tice is 29 years old. He's currently getting paid $5 million. My guess is he's likely going to want a little bit more than that. Not a lot more, but more. Probably in the $7 million to $9 million range. So a lot of it just depends on whether this front office will be able to make the dollars work depending on what they do with the roster. I'm like you though, I'm pretty high on Tice, and my hope is the Bulls will be able to keep him. Next up, we've got Devin Dodson. Devin, how come you're not been getting any minutes, my guy? Anyway, his question is, how would I rate the Bulls trade deadline with all of the people that went in and the people that were out? Which I know this question is a little bit older, as you see the date there, but I thought I would address it quickly anyway. I mean, I personally thought that this was a great trade deadline for the Bulls, despite most people changing their views on that after the Bulls, recent struggles post-trade deadline. In my view, this trade wasn't just made for this year in mind. This was a trade for the future that gave a much needed big man where the Bulls were lacking. A big man that can rebound at an elite level, who can shoot from the outside and is an experienced player in the NBA. You brought in two key defensive players in Tice and Troy Brown Jr., and you got rid of an expiring contract in Otto Porter. Wendell, who I do still like, and I think he actually has a lot of potential, but he was very inconsistent with the Bulls and got injured very frequently. Hutchinson also barely played. The only one I wasn't too happy with getting rid of was Daniel Gafford, just because I was so high on Gafford and felt it was a little too quick to give up on him, but I am happy to see that he's been doing so well with the Wizards. So if I had to give the Bulls trade deadline a grade or rating, I would probably say an A-, maybe a B+. And the reason I say a minus is just because obviously giving up 2 first-round picks for a 30-year-old big man is very risky, and I know it's looking like it's not paying off necessarily right now, but I do firmly believe that this was the right move for the long term, especially once more moves are made in the off seasons, and the front office did ensure that the picks are top 4 protected should they not make the playoffs and get lucky in the lottery. And the move signaled to the team that they're looking to win now rather than just focusing on building through the draft. And I think we'll see more moves made in the off season to enhance that roster even further. Speaking of the off season, our next question comes from So Life Rum. Who realistically can the Bulls get to be a difference maker for next season? So I guess the key, to your question is realistically, meaning who is likely to actually want to come to the Bulls. Will the Bulls have the salary cap space and roster structure to be able to do so, which makes it a little bit more challenging, because normally I would say someone like Chris Paul would be the ideal candidate, but he's not a long-term solution given his age, and he's not going to decline his massive player option that he has on his contract with the Suns. So realistically speaking, and I'm focusing on point guards because that is what the Bulls need the most, an experienced point guard that knows how to run an offense and be a leader on the court to organize the pace and flow. I think Lonzo Ball is one realistic option, not the most ideal player from my perspective, just because I do feel Lonzo, although young and has upside potential, he has been a bit inconsistent and known to go through ups and downs in his performance. The other guy is Mike Conley, but salary-wise, likely not something the Bulls are going to be able to afford or maybe even want to pay given Mike Conley's age. Outside of those two, and really just one being Lonzo, I don't know if there's really one realistically speaking piece that is a game changer anyway. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be plenty of players that the Bulls could add that are realistic, but I wouldn't call them game changers. I can't consider Lonzo Ball a game changer necessarily either. I think he certainly would help because he's a playmaking point guard who also plays really great defense, two things the Bulls need. But does he make them an instant contender? No, I don't know. I don't think the Bulls would still be, automatically title bound just because we've added Lonzo Ball. Now, a similar question that I thought I would touch on, this is from FTR Spitfire again. What major changes do you think will happen this offseason? More or less, who do you see off of the team at the start of the season? Well, let me start with the second part of the question, and who do I see off of this team starting next season? Well, there are a lot of guys with expiring contracts who I don't think will be back, whether it's the right move or not. That's just how I think the front office is going to approach it. I think Denzel Valentine will not be back. His contract is expiring. Cristiano Felicio's contract is expiring, so he's definitely gone. Ryan Arcidiacono, I doubt they will exercise the team option that they have for him for $3 million, so I suspect he'll be gone. I actually don't think that they'll keep Satoransky either. They're likely going to waive him give him his partial guarantee, which will enable him to become a free agent. I think that, between Thaddeus Young and Satoransky, the two partially guaranteed deals, they're going to prioritize Thaddeus as a result. So I expect Thaddeus to be back. I think they'll try to bring Garrett Temple back just because he's been such a valuable asset to this team for his high IQ and defense. But my guess is Temple is likely going to want more money than the Bulls are going to be willing to give him at his age, or even just afford, based on all of the other salary commitments that they're going to potentially have going into free agency. I actually expect to see Tice back. Like I was addressing in the previous question, I think the front office will find a way to make a deal for Tice work so they can keep him on the roster. And then finally, I think Markkanen will likely be in another uniform next season. I hate to say it, as much as I had high hopes for Markkanen in his first couple of seasons in the league, he just hasn't fit well with this roster, especially more recently, because the Bulls absolutely have to prioritize defense above anything else, and Markkanen more often than not has proven to be a liability on defense, and still struggled to be consistent with his shooting as well. I think some team is likely going to overpay him, and Arturas is not going to be willing to match. As far as major changes that will happen this offseason, from your first question, well, that's definitely one. Markkanen not returning with the team. I do think the front office is going to make a push for Lonzo Ball, so that will be a big shift in bringing a defensive-minded pass-first point guard. It will complicate things if Coby continues to play the way that he has been at the point, but I foresee Lonzo coming to Chicago. I could see that potentially happening. If not Lonzo, and this one is definitely a bold prediction, probably a hot take, I wouldn't be shocked if Arturas tries to make an aggressive push for someone like Chris Paul by signing him to a longer-term deal that would convince him to decline his incredibly lucrative player option with the Suns. I don't think it's likely because there's no way CP3 turns down that kind of money. And it's also doubtful the Bulls would have enough cap space to even bring him in for a longer-term deal. Kawhi, in my view, he's not coming. I don't think that's realistic at all. As much as I would love to obviously see him in a Bulls uniform, it's not going to be happening. Let's do one more, and the reason I wanted to do this one is because I see this question or comment all the time across so many platforms from Bulls fans, and that is, do you think Derrick Rose will return home next free agency? I know that D Rose has stated he would love to, but do you think he's on Acme's radar? No, he is not on their radar, and for a couple reasons. Acme, they don't care about the nostalgia factor of bringing D Rose back. If it was GarPax, maybe because they would have known some fans in Chicago would have loved a move like that, and it would have been great press for them. But no, these guys have no ties to Derrick Rose. On top of that, Rose doesn't fit at all with what the Bulls are looking for, not at this stage in his career anyway. The Bulls need a defensive-minded playmaking point guard, which Rose is neither of those. He's an okay playmaker, not like he used to be when he was in the MVP. He's still a solid scorer, but he's not really known for his defense, and at his age, he doesn't make sense for the Bulls' younger core, and he doesn't fit the timeline for what the Bulls are trying to work with. So I love Rose. I love Rose as a player. I really do. He's the hometown kid that put the Bulls back on the map and made it fun and exciting to be a Bulls fan again. But I think his time has passed in terms of him ever coming back to Chicago. Maybe in his last season in his career before he retires, so he can retire as a Chicago Bull. But for his most recent free agency, no, it just doesn't make sense for what the Bulls are trying to do. Okay, there were other questions as well, but I gotta be able to get some of my actual day job work done, so I'll need to end it here for now. I'll have my weekly hot takes video out tomorrow, so feel free to leave your hot takes in the comments as well below. Some have actually already left it in my last video, so thank you for that. Be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for all of the support on the channel, guys. I really do appreciate it, and I will catch you in the next one.